The gentleman from California, Mr. Desaulnier, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your leadership on this. Starting with Ms. Sampson and then Mr. Bussey, if you could comment on the extraordinary cost to Americans for gun violence in this country. And first, I want to refer to a GAO report from last year that the chair asked for that has been covered, including in an article in the New York Times. It estimated that the cost of gun violence is over $1 billion at very least, just in terms of medical costs to federal taxpayers. 60% of these medical costs are paid for through Medicare, Medicaid. And then on another just recent by Everytown Research, the numbers are really sort of staggering to a broader study titled The Economic Cost of Gun Violence, $557 billion annually, comparable to 2.6% of US gross domestic product. So compare those numbers for me based on $3 billion worth of profits, and I take it as after-tax profit, as reported by Trace for gun manufacturers. To me, this is a huge subsidy in addition to the horrible pain and suffering, but just from a financial standpoint. So first, Ms. Sampson, particularly for the Everytown report, but also the GAO and other reports, could you add your comments to the cost of gun violence to American taxpayers?
Thank you, Congressman. I think, as you called it, it is a sort of subsidy because at the same time that American taxpayers are bearing not just obviously the emotional cost in terms of trauma and death, but also financial costs of gun violence, the gun violence epidemic. The gun industry is continuing to make profits, and then they use the violence that they in part facilitate to market to people to tell them that they need to have even more weapons. And so as we hear a lot of talk about self-defense, for example, well, a lot of people want to defend themselves because they're afraid of being shot by people who shouldn't have weapons. And rather than making sure that we make the industry accountable for allowing people to have weapons that they shouldn't have, they just continue to fuel that market. And so they're able to evade responsibility, they're able to evade transparency, and they're able to evade oversight, all while putting the cost of that on American taxpayers and on Americans themselves who die as a result of that misconduct and irresponsibility.
Thanks, Ms. Sampson. Mr. Bussey?
I think that most responsible gun owners want to be a part of the solution and don't want to be a part of the problem. And we need to rebalance those scales. So to the degree to which irresponsible activities or insufficient regulation is leading towards cost of gun violence, I believe through my own experience that responsible gun owners want to play a part in being a solution to that.
Mr. Bussey, I want to talk to you a little bit about having been in elected office in California for a long time and very active in violence prevention programs from a public health standpoint. When we look at, and there's a story in the New York Times recently about just comparing states with evidence-based research, gun violence prevention, and the collective effect they have. So in California, laws, some of which that I have authored at the local and state level, you're 25% less likely to be a victim of gun violence. If you're a young person, you're 35% less likely to be involved in a school shooting. So the gist of that, to me, and the evidence-based research that particularly we've funded in California at the University of California at Davis and their violence prevention program, not just guns, but also in this instance, these policies work, and you're less likely to be harmed by guns if we have these initiatives. Giffords has done a wonderful job, I think, of comparing that internationally. Could you speak to that and anything you would like to add in the time I've got left, Ms. Sampson?
Thank you, Congressman. I think that you're correct, and I would like to take issue with some of the statements I've heard here from other representatives today telling us that gun laws don't work or that they won't be applied to anybody but criminals. And I would like to take your example and apply it to two recent shootings, the Uvalde shooting and the Buffalo shooting. In both of those cases, the shooters waited until they were 18 to purchase the guns. They didn't purchase them when they were 16 and a half. They didn't purchase them when they were 17 3/4. They waited until they were 18. Why is that? Because the law said they couldn't purchase them until they were 18. So to your point, in California and to those cases, the fact is that the laws impact the way people purchase and use guns, and we need to, as a responsible society, and you as a governing body, need to take that into account.
The gentleman's time has expired.
You go back, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The gentlelady